Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of our live show. And tonight with me is a special guest, which you certainly know, but there's a little story I have to tell you because I actually wanted a different guest. And the story is that I was on a conference which was Eclipse in Ludwigsburg 2 years ago, and actually, can you see me? Yeah, you can see me. And there was a girl, and we were talking. She was from booth besides, and she told me she's working for a company that does an IDE in the web browser. And I thought, well, an IDE in a web browser is an interesting thing, and the girl in IT is also great. So maybe I should invite her in this show. Actually, the show didn't exist yet, but I had an idea to invite a girl, which is always a good idea. So I had some chat with her on Twitter, and she wrote me that she's not coming herself, but her boss is here. So welcome with me tonight, Sven Efftinge.
Hey, thanks for having me. Lovely intro. I'm actually, just to make it clear, I didn't know you wanted to have Christine on the show. Christine was just reaching out, asking me whether I want to do that. Should I call her so we invite her now? Oh, maybe not possible, but
yeah. Maybe we should do that. So everybody, please be sorry that you cannot see me at the moment. There seems to be something wrong with my Zoom. Anyway, you're here for Sven, so it's good that you can see Sven, which is much better than seeing me. You know how I look like.
I can see you well, by the way.
You can see me well. That
Yeah.
is interesting. So maybe I should just switch into the gallery mode so you can see us both. I hope at least. Okay, even if not, you're here for Sven, and Sven, I asked you how to pronounce your name, so actually I know that your name is Sven Efftinge, which is great to know because it's a bit embarrassing if I do it wrong. But there's another thing I need to ask you because you have set up a system on the web which we can all use, which is Gitpod, and Gitpod is basing on another product you have developed, and I actually need to know what to pronounce Eclipse Theia.
No one knows. No one knows. Do whatever feels good. I say Eclipse Theia.
Theia.
But
Okay.
Theia, yeah. But maybe you should ask my colleague Arkosh, one of the committers, who came up with the name.
Oh, so it was
but
his
he's
idea.
also I know he's saying Theia.
Theia. And do you know some background of the name? Is that a god or something?
It is. There was. I don't get the story like that. There is this original planet, or Gaia, and when I think it was hit by an asteroid, and then split up. That's the story, and one of these bodies was Theia. I'm not sure whether it was the probably the asteroid that hit Earth and split it apart, like made a huge dent in the universe, basically. Maybe that's the story behind that.
I see. Okay.
It had to do. We wanted to, I think it was kind of in the idea to do it somewhere in something with planets, because we wanted to move it to Eclipse, and we thought that would be a nice idea.
At least you had a puzzle for us how to pronounce it, so that's a great thing, because everybody was googling for the name and what it's like. So that was a good marketing trick, at least. Yeah, talking about Eclipse Theia. So if I understand correctly the system, then this is an IDE that is doing the same like Visual Studio Code, or is compatible somehow and looks similar to it, but it isn't Visual Studio Code. It really is a different product that you wrote or your colleagues wrote. Is that correct?
Not entirely. We in Theia reuses lots of components from VS Code. Like for instance, the editor widget is the Monaco editor. And so we started out like maybe I should start with the question, like, you know, the reason why we actually created and started the project. I've been working with, you know, IDEs in Eclipse land, but also with JetBrains for many, many years. And I've seen lots of tries to get something reasonable or decent running in the browser. And there was, you know, Cloud9 obviously did a lot of pioneer work there. And in the Eclipse world, there was RAP. I'm not sure if you know that, RAP, which like one-on-one translates the Eclipse UI to web, which is, you know, some like, you know,
which doesn't feel good.
Have web. Yeah. There's a reason you want to have web. It just, you know, it's not only it should run in the browser somehow. It also should kind of, you know, feel web-like and so on.
Yeah, it doesn't feel native to the web.
Yeah, and so it was not adopted a lot because of that reason, because the UI still felt old and inflexible because it was still based on the old SWT stuff. Then there was, you know, for instance, Eclipse J or Eclipse Orion. These were tries to create a decent web IDE that could be a successor to Eclipse. And they had a hard time because the challenge with building a successor to something like Eclipse or JetBrains IDEs is you need to implement all the language tooling, you know, everything like building, like Eclipse is not the Eclipse platform, but it is really the JDT and it is the CDT and, you know, all these language specific infrastructure, basically, you know. In JDT, it's really interesting because JDT is a compiler built to also support the IDE somewhat. Yeah. And the reason behind that is it makes sense. You know, you cannot do proper content assist proposals if you don't know a lot about the AST, the abstract syntax tree below, and the linking and the scoping and such things. So this is super hard, and you don't go there and build something easily in the web that is as good as possible. And Cloud9 and Eclipse J and so on, they learned that. So I was working as a consultant, running my own company, Typefox, and we were doing consultancy, and we had a project where we got asked to build a data science IDE in the browser. And we kicked it off with Eclipse J and started working on that. And 1 month in, it didn't feel well, like the right fit. It was, you know, turnarounds were super slow. It felt a bit, you know, too much that we wouldn't need and too little of the things we would need to build and so on. And so I went to the client and said, hey, we need to do this from scratch. This is better. You will be better off long term. And then we were lucky and we found something. It's called Jupyter Lab, where from the Jupyter community, Python Jupyter community, some folks built already something very simple using TypeScript, but from scratch. And we were picking up that, but then it was missing all the language smartness. And then I looked at VS Code and saw, hey, the VS Code folks have done a great job with abstracting away the language smartness in something they call the language server protocol. And I started adopting this. I'm not sure if that was in the order because I was also doing the initial draft for the language server protocol in Eclipse J earlier then. But in the end, we use the VS Code stuff because of the language server protocol, because that's a really smart way to externalize the heavy lifting that is building something like JDT or CDT to the community, right? You just provide this very simple or relatively simple protocol where people can hook in and they can use their language. I mean, it's crazy if you look at CDT. CDT is about C, C++, but
Yeah.
it's written in Java.
Yeah.
It's really hard to convince very, very good C, C++ developers to implement a parser and language smartness in Java for C++. But yeah, somehow they did it.
It is easy to understand when your whole day is about C++, that you don't want to learn Java just to provide this to the IDE. So sure about that.
Yeah, and I guess the VS Code folks were understood that they couldn't, convince everyone to write this stuff in Node, like language smartness. So they introduced the language server protocol, so you could write it in your language and then hook it up. And then you have, additional processes in this protocol. And so then you can use that in other IDEs as well. And then I went off and talked to other IDEs like Eclipse and so on, built these language server protocol adapters and so on.
Which is a really cool idea. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, didn't want to.
They are, I mean, the team behind VS Code, maybe not everyone knows that, they are those who also created Eclipse in the first place, like Eric Gammer and his team.
Yeah.
And they are just excellent IDE developers. I would say the best IDE developer team on the world. So and so they always, I've been following what they've been doing for many years, and it's always super sound, great design, the stuff they have. So for me, it's easy to rely on their work because I trust them. There's sometimes I'm not sure because Microsoft has a lot of power, and I'm kind of a bit concerned about that. But the individuals there are doing a really great job. So that's awesome.
Sure. Okay, great.
Yeah, and the bottom line is we thought, okay, there is no web IDE. We need to build one because and based on this model that VS Code established. At this point in time, VS Code was not ready for the web. So we reached out to the VS Code folks and asked them, hey, do you have any interest in making it web compatible?
Yeah.
So you can run it in a browser. It's 3 or 4 years ago. They said no. VS Code originally ran in the browser as Visual Studio Online. Then they, for some reason, saw it doesn't work out. Then they moved it to the desktop, built VS Code. In that time, we created Theia, which run in the browser, and built Gitpod on top of that. And now they see, okay, seems to be time to move back to the browser and do that with GitHub code spaces, for instance. And now when you go to VS Code, and you probably also saw this GitHub 1 second thing, this is the web version of VS Code.
I see.
Which only now kind of works in basically. Yeah. So when we started Theia, there was no way to run it in the browser.
Yeah. I was totally rude actually. I already have a drink here and didn't offer you any drink. So what do you like to have, or do you have a drink with you?
No, I would like one from you. What is it that you have there?
You can have from my alcohol-free beer or from the whiskey I have here. So this is single malt whiskey from Bavaria and from Austria.
No, I like beer, but I also like alcohol. So I'll go with a Frühlingsbock.
Oh no! You cannot show the brand. This is ad free.
Why not? There is no brand. It's this is a local brewery from Kiel.
Really?
There's no way for you to get this really great stuff.
Okay, if nobody can buy it, then it's totally cool to show it actually. So cheers to you, Sven, and thanks for the introduction, which was really amazing so far. Because now we learned why Eclipse Theia is different and is unique actually on the market, and it's actually great. I did some projects with it, and indeed I do all my open source programming with Eclipse Theia, while I have not installed it somewhere, but I'm just using your free Gitpod offering. And by the way, I saw, because you mentioned Eclipse Che, that Eclipse Che meanwhile is basing on Eclipse Theia 2. Actually, is it right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
I mean, for a
That's a
long time, actually, I think for almost 2 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'm asking you because people came to me when I did my Gitpod video some months back, and they were asking what is the difference between Eclipse J and Eclipse Theia. Both are IDEs in the browser somehow, and I couldn't explain it. So actually, is there a market still for that Eclipse J, or would you say everybody should go with Eclipse Theia?
No, I would say that Eclipse J is more like a direct competitor to Gitpod. So
I
it's
see.
not a web IDE, but it's more like around the
Mm-hmm.
provisioning of workspaces.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I
and
see.
so before that, it was also, they were developing their own IDE, but then eventually they decided, no, let's just use Theia.
Okay, but
So
definitively
yeah,
going with Gitpod is the better idea.
if you ask me or what.
Yeah, sure. You're the guest. I ask you.
No, I privately use Eclipse Chair. I wouldn't use, no, of course, yeah.
Sure, sure.
But I also have to be honest, like I haven't looked deeper into Eclipse Chair
Yeah,
for, I would say, the last 1.5 years or 2 years.
yeah,
But I made a lot of not so great experience before that. But I think they
yeah,
have moved on as well, and maybe
yeah,
they got rid of some
yeah.
legacy and so on. So Uh, I mean, the real competition here is all the folks who still maintain their local dev environments, massage them, do
Mm,
the yak shaving on a daily basis.
mm,
And so I think the Eclipse J or CodeNV, they were also pioneering important stuff here,
yeah,
with you have a workspace description and so on.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And talking about Gitpod, I have seen that there is not just the free offering which I am using. You also have an offering for professional use of Gitpod. So what would you briefly describe is the benefit of going with the commercial support for Gitpod and not just using the free offering? Besides that, it pays your bills.
You can use private repositories, for instance. I think that's the key feature at the moment.
Okay, so this means that the free offering is basing on the public repositories like GitLab and GitHub, and with the supported offering, you can go with your own setups that has private and closed source repositories. So this is mostly what professional users would do because they don't want to share their stuff on GitHub. So that's what
No,
they.
I mean, also private repositories on GitHub or GitLab.com.
Ah,
On their
okay,
SaaS
okay,
offering, they also have private repositories, and they also have a very similar model there, where
okay.
public repositories are free and private repositories are not.
Yeah.
And we align basically with that. It makes also sense, I would say.
Okay, I see.
Uh,
I see. There's one thing I often become asked my own, um, which is why are you providing stuff for free at all? If so many people are good with the free offering of Gitpod, you cannot make much money. So why are you doing that? Wouldn't it be better if everybody would just pay a few dollars instead of completely free?
it would be better if everyone just gives me a few dollars, but reality is different. No, I mean, we are building something. Maybe we also should also share about what really the product vision of Gitpod really is. It's not a web IDE, as you said in the beginning.
Yeah.
But I can do that later. But if you build something that is kind of a bit new, right? It changes how you work. It's solving problems you have in your daily flow that you are so used to that you don't even recognize they are problems. You're just taking them for granted. And so now someone's coming and saying, hey, I could solve all these problems for you, but hey, you cannot try it. Or also, there is no one out there who could tell you about the experience, because it's all private, and you get only to see this once you pay. Then it's harder to spread the word, get the excitement about it out. And also, Gitpod is an open source project and product, so we really want this to our goal is in a few years that basically everyone is using something like that. And we believe that will be the case. So going local and maintaining your dev environment locally will be similar to if you were going to a new job and they were telling you, hey, we use CVS as version control, and then you would say, all right, it's 2021, you use CVS, what's wrong here? In a few years you will see this with dev environments that are not automated. That will be really kind of I mean, how should I even get started here at this job? Yeah.
So you mentioned that I misunderstood a bit the concept of Gitpod, which certainly I did. Maybe it's a good idea if you show us just a little bit what you can do with Gitpod, or what it's looking like, so people can have an impression of the system.
That's good. I give you a demo on stuff I've been working on today.
Cool, great. Now we see the live code.
It is really, I'm like the project I'm currently working on.
But when this is your real code, I have some bugs here I found in Gitpod. Maybe you'd like to fix them for us.
You have to know that I'm not deep in engineering, but deep in product, and product is kind of, a bit before, more explorative and so on. So I do technical stuff, but I do it in spikes and prototypes. So this one is, we are working on a new dashboard. I work together with my colleague George, who is our product designer, and he's building designs in Figma, and I'm working currently on getting them into a proper React, TypeScript, Tailwind CSS app. So laying out the architecture and the components and so on a bit, and conceptually. And then the next step is hand it over to the engineering team. So that's how we work. And so I have here a GitHub project. It's actually public, by the way, because there's, for us, it's not a lot of reason to do a lot of stuff in private. We want to be very transparent and engaged, have everyone kind of, engage with us and get feedback. Could only help. So what you see here is standard GitHub, but you see this button here. And that is not standard GitHub. That is because I installed a Chrome extension. What's up here? There. So if you go to this Chrome Web Store and you install this extension, then you will see this button on all your GitHub pages.
I see. So this is not written or coded into GitHub, but the browser puts it there on your computer.
Right.
I see.
It understands, I'm on GitHub and this is a project page. You will also get this button, for instance, on pull requests. It is behind this window here. And so with that, for instance, I could immediately open this PR and have a look at the changes, right? And then I can do that. I can do that just now. I click that. I clicked it with command, so it opens in a new tab. now it's starting a dev environment on that branch of the pull request, and initializes it so that I can just get started on that state. So this is nice if you do a code review, for instance, on the side, because what I can also do is in parallel work on the main thing, on the main branch. So I start a dev environment here, and I have one here, and so here you see the branch state. And it's probably broken. So you see here in the console, there is an error. So my PR is not really in a good state at the moment, as it seems. But I don't have to wait for this. The Gitpod, in Gitpod, you put in a Gitpod YAML into the root, and that is versioned along with your project. And therein, this is super simple. Usually what you can do here is you can add a Docker file, and then you can say, I need Postgres started, and I need an application server, or you can even point to a Docker Compose and you install, run Docker Compose. So everything, like what Gitpod really is not the web IDE. The web IDE is just VS Code of Theia, but it is the automation of a dev environment, and the dev environment is so much more. It's all the tools you need on the command line, like the right compilers, code generators, and things I mentioned already, like databases and so on. And if you have a proper configuration, the whole team can, on any branch, any state, spin up dev environments and work on that commit immediately with no setup. And then Zoom is getting in the way a bit. So what you see here, this is the main branch, obviously a different state. You see it started already a web server, and it routes the port 3000, which is exposed. So I can open a browser, and then I see the web app that I'm currently working on here as a kind of in a preview. And I can just go here and start working on things I would like to change. So let's see, we have a profile page, personal information, and I just as you would work locally, hello, whatever, and you see it just updates as you would assume. And the point is, you can you get all the things you have locally, basically, without the burden of maintaining that state or configuring that.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, then what the system does is that it looks for the Gitpod YML file and uses that to bootstrap Docker containers somewhere in a data center. And when it's done with booting that, then it starts the IDE inside of that. And it pulls the PR from GitHub, so you have a ready to use dev environment instantly, or rather instantly, and you can throw it away when you're done. So you have always a clean environment.
Correct. And we call these ephemeral dev environments. Because they are actually disposable, but disposable is not such a nice word, so we use ephemeral. But it's really the point is it frees up your mind. You don't have to think about am I in the right state? And when you switch to other things, I do everything in Gitpod, and the whole team is doing everything in Gitpod, not because we have to, but just because it's simpler and nicer. And we all don't know there are things like git fetch or git checkout or something like that, because we don't need that. We always go here, I am on a different branch. Okay, I want to do that. I want to start a dev environment. I do that. And another thing that is important to understand is these dev environments are pre-built. So the container, the Docker image is pre-built, But then also when there is a new commit on your branch, Gitpod gets the information from a webhook from GitHub asynchronously, and will, like a CI system, get the latest changes and rebuild the project and prepare the dev environment. So you don't have to wait for Maven downloading the internet or running long compiler procedures or something like that. That's all done. When you start this app, it really does, this init task, that is what is executed asynchronously during pre-build. So right after commit, after push. And then when someone comes along and starts the dev environment, they get the result of this state as a copy, and then we run yarn start there only, like the command.
I see.
And yeah.
So not only that it sets up the dev environment, it also does the first steps that you want to have. You want to have a clean compiled setup where you can start fixing your bugs. So you don't have to do git pull, you don't have to do compilation. That's all done for you. You just start with the actual work you like to do. That's pretty great. There's just one thing.
And our challenge is just making that fast and reliable. Basically, that's what our product is about.
Yeah. There's one thing I not yet understood. This is, where is this Gitpod YML file coming from? Because the projects I'm using Gitpod with doesn't have this file. So I just click the green button and can work. I never wrote that file. So is that set up automatically somehow?
There is not a lot of setup going on in that case. That's basically like if you open a project that doesn't have a Gitpod YAML, then we have some exceptions, like for Golang, for instance. We do a couple of things, but say for a Java project, we started with a very generic and massive Docker image. So this is also used here. So it has, for instance, it has Java installed, for instance. Okay.
And it has SDK man. I learned that.
It has SDK man installed, correct. Is it SDK? That is SDK man, right? Yeah. Right. So it comes already equipped with a lot of things for mainstream programming languages. And therefore, you get a nice start, basically. But if you want to really use the value of Gitpod, then you should definitely have a Gitpod YAML and start making using pre-builds, for instance. So we have Spring Pet Clinic, oops, I think that is the project. So this is a Spring Pet Clinic, and here you see the Gitpod YAML is super small again, right? But it does Maven package, which runs, it takes quite some time. And so you skip this. So you skip all this waiting. You start it, and the Tomcat, I think it's the Tomcat that's running there, is immediately running, and you already, you are already in a state where you can start working on the Spring Pet Clinic project.
Yeah.
But these are simple examples. I want to give you another. I'm not super well prepared for this long. GitLab. I think that's the main repository of GitLab, is it? And so they are also using Gitpod. And as you can imagine, GitLab is a quite complicated project.
Yeah.
And so here you see a Gitpod YAML in action, right, in the wild. Wow. So this is what it can look like.
Okay.
If it's not an example. So they point to an image that they version in a different project. And then they have very extensive commands. This is running in the init phase. This is in a command phase. you can configure ports, what should happen when a port opens, and so on. And then, of course, also you provide what kind of extensions should be installed for the team.
Yeah.
On top of that, there's also the user level. So often people say, "Hey, I want to have a different theme and stuff like that."
Yeah.
This is of course not checked in. You can have that in your user account.
And so this is really a huge file. So you have to spend a lot of knowledge to come to this point. So this is not the starter YAML file. This is the one you end with when you do really complex projects. For starters, typically I think it's a good idea to start writing a Gitpod YAML file and to go to your documentation where the steps are explained, what you should do first in that file and what you can customize like doing that. So you go step by step with more and more complex Gitpod YAML files. I even learned one feature from a colleague of you at EclipseCon. He told me that you even can put the Gitpod YAML files on different locations, so you don't have to put them into your repository. You can somehow point elsewhere. Is that right?
We have one fallback. What Gitpod currently does is if there is no Gitpod YAML in your root repository of that commit you are checking out, it will go to a repository in GitHub called definitely GP. Yeah. So definitely Gitpod, and looks there for this project based on organization and name. This is really not something we like a lot, because then the configuration is not versioned alongside your code. So there's only one version for the whole project, which doesn't make a lot of sense. It's more like this, if you are working on a larger project and team and you don't have, you cannot convince the team to check in a Gitpod YAML because only two in the team say that we want to have that, and the rest say, hey, we don't, don't check in tool specific stuff. Then that's the last resort, basically.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question. Actually, I had that problem. So that really looks amazing, and all that is for free. You really should charge something for that.
We charge. But if you're only working on open source and public repos, then that's fine, because you're probably also sharing or spreading the word a bit, like you did, writing an article or having me here on the podcast, and then that's much better than money helping us spreading the word.
So when you talk about open source, why actually did you join the open source community? What was your driver to say, I don't want to get a millionaire at Microsoft writing closed source code? I go with my own company and provide open source.
I'm not sure in what direction this question goes, but I am not an open source guy I'm not dogmatic about that. I think closed source is fine if it makes sense, all in all. But I think in many, many ways, open source makes more sense also business-wise. That's just the whole idea that developers have a lot to say. Like when you work on developer tools specifically, like frameworks, APIs, but also tools and so on, we as developers, we are just used to, be able to look under the hood. It makes us comfortable, participating, having good open conversations and so on. Transparency, all those things are really helpful. And if you're working, as a company, you should also, I think it just helps your own team if you embrace these values of transparency and so on, you need to do that also internally.
Mm. Mm.
And
Yeah.
it's much nicer. I mean, we had a time where Gitpod was not open source. Like before that, I only worked in open source projects if I was not working for clients sometimes. And then we worked on Gitpod, and for the first 2 years, we did that in closed source. And it so often felt a bit like, you strange that you were talking with someone in the community and they had a question and you couldn't really answer that because you wanted to point them to the code and tell them, hey, yeah, this is how we do it. And, you can, from there, you can draw how you can solve it and so on. It would be much easier. But no, I couldn't do that because it was closed source and was like, for me, I could make decisions, but a lot of many in the teams, it wasn't clear what kind of information can I share or not, so on. And just, I love the way GitLab is solving that, which is saying open by default, public by default, and you explicitly mark those things that should not be shared publicly, which is much simpler and nicer as doing it kind of the other way around, which seems to be still the default in the industry. Everything is closed, and then you have to pick, and that doesn't really work well with developer communities. And if your clients and users and community are made of developers, they are just used to a bit more open, transparent way of working on a product.
It makes working together just simpler when things are open. So security certainly has a reason why it's there, but as you said, it's often just a bias. So a default that nobody thought about in the end. I actually hope that more companies will change their bias and do things more in the open and switch it secret when they need to have it secret. But that's just my personal opinion. So this was already 45 minutes, and it was just like it would be 5. It was cool to see your product and what you can do, amazing things when you configure the Gitpod YAML file. I never did that. Maybe that's a problem I run into with my trials. So I should learn.
Yeah, we have to get better with communicating this value. For a lot of people, Gitpod is still like an easy peasy way to open a web IDE.
So the real magic is only there when you learn to write your Gitpod YAML file. I learned that, and I will do it. So I'm always looking at the second monitor you cannot see, and I hope that the people watching the live show will write some questions there. People, you have to type it. Don't just discuss among you. You have to write into the chat when you want to know something from Sven. So until yet, there are no other questions. Maybe I already answered the most dumb ones or asked them on my own. So another dumb question from me. I had some trouble with Gitpod. This happens when you don't read the documentation. So if I have trouble next time, where can I go to?
Community.gitpod.io is the place, basically, is the forum.
Okay, so it's a public forum where I can ask my dumb questions and everybody's loving and hopefully we'll tell.
No one is loving. There are no stupid questions.
I only have stupid questions. That's my problem.
No, it's all good.
Yeah. Okay. Sven, there actually are no more questions, neither from me on my stack. That was the last one. Nor from our audience, unfortunately. So maybe everything is answered. My beer is empty also, nearly.
Yeah,
mine
not, but I will still keep drinking it after the show, so no problem.
I will not throw you out. So maybe if there is something you want to tell the audience about your company or about your offerings or about Gitpod or Eclipse, Theia or any other project, then we have some open space. If not, there's no problem. Everybody will come to you and ask questions on the forum.
Yeah, I think I rambled a lot, and so I don't want to stretch this artificially.
Yeah.
No, I mean, just generally, if you think this is an interesting idea, go to our GitHub repo. The code is there. You can just prefix any GitHub repo, so you don't have to install the browser extension. You just go to any GitHub repository and prefix it with gitpod.io hash. And then it will start a dev environment for you, and you can try it out for free, as Marcus said many times. But yeah, that's the thing. And then look into the automation and the pre-built stuff and see if it makes sense, and reach out if it not, and so on. So any kind of feedback is super interesting and helpful for us.
Okay, great. Sven, thank you so much for being in the show. It was really helpful and interesting, and it will. And I hope that many more programmers will jump on the train and start using Gitpod. So thank you to Kiel, and you told me you wish that the winter ends, and I have good news for you. It will definitively.
So, I'm so glad now. Thanks.
Yeah. Goodbye to Kiel, and always
Bye-bye.
party on. Goodbye.
Will do. Bye-bye.